Hello, good afternoon, Steelers fans. We have breaking news coming out of the south side of Pittsburgh today. The Steelers have sent veteran wide receiver Chase Claypool to the Chicago Bears for a second-round pick in the 2023 draft. This is substantial news for a variety of reasons, probably the most of which that the Steelers were not expected to execute on alleged trade rumors swirling around about Claypool, something that pretty much everybody in the local media brushed off as if there's no way that was going to happen. The reality is Chase Claypool probably was the only player on the Steelers team heading into this trade deadline, which is 4 p.m. Eastern today, that had any significant trade value. This is interesting for a variety of different ways. One, I would say, and I have said on our program before, by the way, this is the new standard. I'm Neil Coulong. Lance Williams is at work. I'm not even going to do the on assignment bit. He's unable to join us right now to join our breaking news segment. But the Steelers likely would have seen a market of around a third-round pick for Claypool, considering who he is, what he has been to this point in his career. And that third-round pick probably wouldn't have changed had they traded him for that before the draft, when the second time period in which of the NFL schedule in which draft picks are traded frequently outside of the trade deadline. To get a second round pick, and not just a second round pick, a high second round pick for Chase Claypool right now from the Bears. If you would have told me that that's what they could have gotten for him, I would have told you flat out that you were wrong, and I probably would have laughed. I don't think the Steelers expected to get this trade. I don't think they expected to make the offer, or to receive the offer from anybody. But it is one that there's no way they could have passed on. That is potentially a top 40 draft pick for a player that was deemed less than the rookie that they just drafted, incidentally, in the second round, to replace him on the outside. Now, if we were breaking down Chase Claypool's game, he is as perfectly crafted to be an X receiver, an outside receiver at the NFL level as anybody is. He's tall, he's fast, he's very long, he's got that long hurdler kind of run to him. That's a guy that you put outside the numbers and you're looking to get the ball in a deep post or on a fly. That's what Claypool did up until this season, in which the presence of George Pickens, who is frankly a much better outside receiver than Claypool is, that caused the Steelers to move Claypool inside where he's playing the slot, and he really shouldn't be playing in the slot. But here's the thing: the Steelers don't have a real natural slot receiver. At the same time, Claypool, though less than Pickens, is not somebody you want to take off the field necessarily. So he can fit in well into that role. He's been in the offense. He understands it well enough to be able to do it. This is to say the slot is the kind of the thinking man's wide receiver position. Outside the numbers, you don't have as much space to operate in, so there are only so many things that you're going to do. Inside, think of it like this: Juju Smith-Schuster had a similar transition when he was moved outside to inside. The value to the Steelers in doing that is that Juju is a very, very smart football player. He can pick up on blitzes. He knows where things are going, and he could serve as a hot receiver when facing a blitz. Certainly last season with a pretty poor offensive line, he served in that role well for the slight amount of time they had him, but they had him doing it the year before, and he was productive out of that. They wanted Claypool to be that kind of receiver. I don't know if I saw enough from Claypool to really say that he could excel as a slot guy, and he absolutely shouldn't be a slot receiver. But I'll say this, just like with Juju, the Steelers were not intending to pay significantly on a long-term multi-year extension for Claypool or Juju, because at different points of time, they felt they had better receivers on the outside, which moved them inside. Knowing that, put it in this context, it's like the Steelers getting an offer of a second round pick for Juju last year. It's a deal you absolutely have to make. Now, What does that do for the Steelers? I don't know. I honestly, I did not think they were going to make this move because I don't know who their slot receiver would be necessarily. Maybe they don't want to operate out of that. Maybe they're just going to utilize Pat Fryermuth more in that position, not run as much 11 personnel, which would be 3 receivers on the field, one of which in the slot. I don't know. They have a bye week to figure that out. But once again, the key thing to know here is, in all sincerity, and I've bagged on Claypool for 2 years now. In all sincerity, his market isn't anywhere close to a second round pick. It's not that low. He was tradable for sure. He was the Steelers' best trade asset, considering his contract, considering his upside, his size, his athleticism. He was the most tradable guy on the Steelers roster. There was no doubt about that, which is funny. That's why the local media freaking out about people suggesting that he could be traded was funny to me. Clearly, he could be traded. The Steelers would not have traded him unless they got blown away by an offer, and I couldn't envision a scenario in which somebody would have given him a high second round. Someone would have given Pittsburgh a high second round pick for him. I mean, that's just, it's ridiculous. A massive win for the Steelers in this trade, for a team that, keep in mind, the Steelers had 5 draft picks going into this draft. They're down their 5th for the Akella Witherspoon deal that bill finally came due, and they traded a 7th for Malik Reed with Denver. They need draft capital. This is a 2-6 team with little to no depth. And unless they were blown away by an offer, they were not going to move Claypool. I honestly don't see any scenario in which they could have expected somebody to give up a top 40 pick for Claypool, but they got it. So you're looking at a Steelers team that realistically right now could have 3 draft picks in the top 40 this coming draft, and they absolutely need it. So the real value here for Pittsburgh is the acquisition of draft capital, which they need. Chase Claypool was probably not a guy that they wanted to get back. Okay, excuse me. Joey Jr. here, who's calling me buddy, says it's Baltimore's pick. All right, so fine. Put that down probably the 60 range. So the Steelers would have 3 picks in the top 60. Still pretty good. It's capital that they need. That's really the point here. You need to be able to take on as many darts to throw at the board as possible right now, just because they have no depth. They're obviously not going anywhere this season. They're not a very competitive team. They're going to have to add to the cupboards as much as they can. They're going to have to find starters, and to have 3 premium picks in this draft is absolutely much needed. Probably a lot more than an outside receiver who's forced to play inside because the rookie is better than him. And Claypool wasn't going to sign long-term anyway because, well, he's an outside receiver. Chicago gives him a chance to boost his career a bit, make more plays down the field, which is really the type of receiver he should be. So honestly, I think in a way, Chicago gets a valuable asset if they have a boatload of cap space coming up over the next 2 years. So they would be in a much better position and have much more desire to sign him long-term should that opportunity present itself for both sides there. To recap again, the Steelers have traded wide receiver Chase Claypool to the Chicago Bears for a 2nd-round draft pick. As I am being told by a couple people now here and in various other forms of media, the Steelers will get by proxy the Baltimore Ravens 2nd-round pick, which the Bears acquired in the deal for Roquan Smith, which was made yesterday. So depending on where the Ravens finish the 2022 season, that is where the Steelers will get that 2nd-round pick. I would probably say that's going to be 57 to 61, somewhere in there. I think the Ravens will make a run this year. That's just me. But a huge pickup for Pittsburgh. I want to look through your comments here. I'm just grabbing them at random and enjoying the chaos that comes with this. This is good to me because, I don't need to read anything past I would trade Mitch. Yes, I would trade Mitch too. Unfortunately, they're not going to do that. We are, 2 hours away from the trade deadline, 4 p.m. Eastern here on Tuesday, November 1st. Mitch Trubisky will not be traded. I didn't think the Steelers would trade anybody. Like I said earlier, Claypool was really the only player who had trade value for this season. When you factor in contract, when you factor in the length and the dollar amount of that contract, what the Steelers need to field something that looks like a competitive roster, it would have taken a lot to trade pretty much any of their players. And Claypool was the most reasonable option of all of that. So I honestly, I didn't think putting a premium on top of a trade, which always happens in the NFL. There's no equal value in a current situation in the NFL. When you trade a player in season, you've built up around that player. When he's a starter in particular, you have investment in that player, and replacing him is probably not going to be the easiest thing in the world to do. So you have to get a bit more than what his market value ordinarily would be in order to execute that trade. The Steelers got well above that, in my opinion. I don't think a late third would probably be sufficient premium for Claypool. And I was saying I think that's going to happen before the draft. I wouldn't have thought this would happen in season. Thank you, Chicago Bears. I think the value of this is extraordinary. We're going to throw this up there just because this is awesome. Do your research. What an asshole. You know what? Don't even listen. If you really think it's that big of a deal, don't listen. If you want to work in media, if you want to have to operate at the speed that you're required to, be my guest. Let's see what you do with it. A little bit harder than you think that it is. And plus, you chimed in like 20 minutes after the trade, so you had a lot more time to research than I did. Do we trade? All right, you know what? I want to go to this because honestly, I think this might be what they do. Not to suggest that Calvin Austin would have been a slot receiver. I think a lot of people looked at his size and said that he would be a slot guy in Pittsburgh. He didn't play in the slot in college. And on top of that, like I said earlier, a slot receiver is not just a nothing position. You have to know more about the offense when you're playing in the slot than you do on the outside. You can't just put a rookie in there and expect him to go out and play. That's why you see a lot of players, in many ways, I think that's why Kansas City wanted Juju Smith-Schuster as much as they did, because he could play inside. He can figure out blitzes. He can see the soft spot in short zones to be an outlet receiver, to be a hot receiver. There's a lot that you have to know. And if Calvin Austin was going to be a slot receiver for the Steelers, the fact that he only practiced for he only had 4 practices before he was hurt. Then he went on injured reserve. He apparently was hurt again in practice for 3 weeks. He wasn't ready to play that at the NFL level. It's not easy to just pick up the slot spot. For what they have, though, I'll say this. I think Anthony Miller was the guy that they wanted to come in and compete for a slot position in some way. And maybe that wouldn't have been enough for him to have been able to make the team. But looking forward, they put him on injured reserve, which means they're keeping him and they're paying him this whole time. So there's value to keeping Miller around for next year. As far as the immediacy goes, Gunnar Olszewski, I think, is the most obvious choice. But that size, that blocking ability, being close to the tight end, being able to get to an edge linebacker, we've seen Olszewski try to do that. And we shouldn't even need to see it. Olszewski is 5'0", 100. He's not able to make much of an impact there to help out the whole offense. Boykin, though, is a big guy. Boykin, for as not physically gifted as he is as a receiver, I think he's a physical presence inside. I think he can help block in numbers screens. In other words, if they got 2 receivers to just 2 tacklers on that side, if they call a screen, Boykin can get a block. Boykin can run interference. I think they might use him a little bit more in that role. But Olszewski would be my guess of what they would do. But also, like I said earlier, I think they have a bye week to figure that out. And they're happy to do that because there's no way they expected to get that kind of a pick, likely top 60 pick for their demoted slot receiver. You are listening to and watching, I suppose, the New Standard podcast. I am Neil Coulong. I'm usually joined by Lance Williams, but he is off solving the crimes of the world, I'm sure, doing something fantastic because he's Lance. Again, I'm grabbing this at random here. How do I feel about Matt Canada? I think Matt Canada has proved himself to be the least effective offensive coordinator in the NFL. And I think he has approximately 9 games left at most in that position. So we were wondering over the bye week if Canada was going to be around. As far as I know right now, he still is. But hey, big news comes in twos, right? I don't even know if that's true or not. But who knows? I mean, the day is young. This would be the day you'd kind of expect them to make a move. We saw earlier the Colts fired offensive coordinator Marcus Brady. Very well earned, I think, top to bottom. But that offense is a mess. That team is a mess. In fact, I have kind of tongue-in-cheek said I'm looking forward to Frank Reich being available to hire as the Steelers offensive coordinator next year. Very well could happen depending on his contract and buyout situation. But the Colts firing their offensive coordinator, the reason I'm bringing that up is just because this is a reasonable time of the year where teams might make those moves. You don't see the coordinators fired in season all that often, but it does happen. So Matt Canada, yes, he's not good. He hasn't been good. We have not seen that. Yes, if I didn't make this clear earlier, yes, he is on injured reserve. What I meant was he wasn't going to come in and be the slot receiver. That's why Claypool was moved there. One way to look at it. There wasn't an option at the slot position. Once Anthony Miller went down, I think they had eyes on Claypool potentially playing that spot, but it was going to depend on Pickens' development. Once Pickens showed that he could play, that he was capable of playing on the outside, moving Claypool inside is the reasonable move. I don't think that Austin was necessarily thought to be their option in the slot. The reason I brought it up is just to dispel the idea that the 5'8" guy is automatically your slot receiver. He never played in the slot in college. He wasn't a slot receiver. So the fact that he didn't practice, he wouldn't have ever had time to really learn all the nuances of the position. So he was not an option. And clearly the fact that he's on injured reserve proves that he is not. So got to be a couple more moves left today. If you were speaking about the Steelers, I really don't, I didn't anticipate the move that they made. I really don't think that they will, but who knows? I think we are entering an era of Steelers general management that isn't going to be quite the same as what we have seen. I'm not saying better or worse. I am saying, though, that what we have is a situation in which the team is probably as bad as it has been in the last 22, 23 years. And they have a new general manager, not a new face, but somebody that has not been in the position that he is in before. I think with that, you're going to make some unexpected moves, do some things that you might not typically do. That said, I don't think the Steelers have anybody that's worth trading for anything that matters today. I mean, if they want to dump a player for a 7th round pick, somebody that they would cut otherwise, sure, that might happen, but I don't anticipate that. They're fairly solid with the bad roster that they have. There's not really any moves that they can make. They're not trading TJ Watt. They're not trading Kenny Pickett. They're not trading Mitch Trubisky. So those kinds of things. Mason Rudolph would have been traded if he had any value. To trade Mason Rudolph right now, you need a team that absolutely has to have a quarterback that knows what they're doing at a high level. And Rudolph's been with this coaching staff currently since they've been around. And the ones that he was with before that aren't coaching. So there's no place for Rudolph to go that matters. And, I don't think Pittsburgh's quarterback situation is solid enough to say they don't need all 3 of them to do something. No real reason in my mind to make a move there. I don't see any particular reason to trade Trubisky or Rudolph. If somebody came and offered them a second round pick for Mitch Trubisky, I promise you they would take it. Wouldn't that be something? We'd have another emergency podcast if that was the case, which is too bad because I have to get going here. What else we got? Other questions? I kind of disagree with this. I think Claypool could get after it. I mean, blocking for a receiver, there's a lot of opportunity that you need to block. And right now, what we see to combine with the last point that was made about Matt Canada, they don't run combination routes all that much. They're not throwing combo screens all that much. They're not asking their receivers to really block downfield. Now, I say that because it doesn't stand out on tape, but I think for it to stand out more on tape, they would need to, complete more passes down the field. They would need to have more yards after the catch. Right now, quarterbacks are throwing to spots, the receivers aren't moving, and they're getting tackled pretty much where they catch. So I don't know how much the blocking matters. I mean, it'd be nice if that was a factor. That seems more like a Cadillac problem, though. To Lance's point, he's a huge fan of 12 personnel. I could definitely see that. I would like to see that more. Getting into other news around the NFL that fits into this, the Vikings just traded a second and a third round pick for superstar and one of my favorite players in the NFL, TJ Hawkinson from the Lions. You get Irv Smith back for the Vikings in a couple weeks from an ankle injury. Late in the season, they're going to be the Vikings are going to be running 12 at a high level. That's two tight ends on your line, and you're able to run and pass out of that in a lot of creative different ways. It's very difficult to defend that if you have the right tight ends to do it, and a very good offensive line. Vikings seem okay in that area. I'm really interested to see Hawkinson and Irv Smith, who's also a kid I absolutely loved when he was coming out of college. I would love to see them run. Freiermuth and Gentry don't really have the same appeal to me, but they do some things. I wonder if they aren't going to do that. But again, the main thing here is there's no reasonable evidence to suggest the Steelers legitimately expected to get offered a second round pick for Chase Claypool. They're taking it because it's such a hugely one-sided deal. You just simply have to take that. So as far as what they're going to do, we don't know yet, but they've got the bye week to figure it out. And I would hope they've got the offensive coordinator that wants to keep his job beyond week 9 this season. They better figure out something, because it does seem interesting that they are going to challenge an already challenged offense by taking away one of its starters. I think that's a great conversation. Lance and I are going to get into that tomorrow for sure. As it is, you are listening to the Emergency Chase Claypool Was Traded podcast here on the New Standard. I am Neil Coulong, usually alongside Lance Williams, who is unfortunately unable to make it today. I want to thank you all for tuning in. I've got something that I've got to do here. I'm going to stick around, though. If you want to give me a shout on Twitter, it's just at Neil Coulong. Let's hash this out. I think it's going to be a fun day. There are a lot of different things to look at. As usual, though, in the ending of the show, tell a friend, tell a friend, and subscribe. Thanks for listening, guys.